Hello, everybody. Hey, Destiny.
Hello. Hi, Lee.
Hello.
How are you? I will say, I really love that intro. That was
I
so
know.
cute and like perfect.
Didn't I do well? I did so well.
You did
And
an
we're
awesome
pink.
job. You did great.
And we are pink. Y'all, we used to change the colors up, but we are here for season 3
Mm-hmm.
and we're staying pink the entire time. Because we moved from
Yes, pretty in
nighttime to
pink.
daytime, and there is no other color than pink that speaks daytime. So we're pink.
Amen
But
on that,
welcome to
Lee.
season 3. And it's good to see you, Destiny. How have you been? What is new? We are in a new season. Yes. So what is new?
I've been great. You know, there's been some new changes in my life, and I should have sent you a picture so we can like put it up on the next week. Well,
I know.
next couple weeks. Which is
I
one of the
know.
things we
Let the
should
people
announce later
know.
on. But I've been good. I've been great. Motherhood is nice.
Yeah. 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 And if anybody, so Destiny is a mother now to a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful child. And that's where we've been. Destiny's been dealing with motherhood. I moved, and it's taken us a while to get our things together and come back for season 3. But we're very excited for season 3. We have some wonderful guests that are lined up for the year. And just before we get started, we are a little different this time. We can't do every week. There's just no way.
Mm-mm.
I don't know how we did
No
that.
way.
I don't know how we did that. How do we do every week?
Grace of God. The grace
The
of
grace
God.
of God. The grace of God,
He alone
and
made it
we
happen.
but we are coming to you every other week, and we'll have schedules out specifically at the end of this episode. We'll show what's coming up next. And yeah, we're coming at you every week, every other week. We can't do every week. Um so with that said, we're going to welcome our guests for this first episode, and we're going to be talking about the sacred creative. So we're going to bring our guests on, and just like any other time we do this show, we're going to invite them to introduce themselves. And so, guest, welcome to the show.
Hello.
Hello, hello.
Hey, y'all. It's so good to see
So
y'all. Tell
good
the
to
people
have
who you
you.
are.
Sam, you want to go first?
Sure. My name's Sam Lundquist. I'm the associate pastor at St. John's in San Francisco. Had I known the theme was pink, I would have worn more pink. So I apologize. I have a little bit right here.
Yeah, you have a little bit on
A
there.
little
What is
pink.
that? Wells?
No, these are little cacti.
Oh, cute. Love it.
I'm pretending it's not raining outside with cacti.
Oh, it's crazy here.
But good to be with y'all today.
I'm Theresa. I'm the other pastor at St. John's. And yeah, we're trying to not get washed away by the rain and the wind right now. So
Yes.
we're happy to be here with you, safe in our building for now.
Yes, and we're sending prayers out to y'all and to California from the floods. Like, we're sending love and prayer and
It's
good
a
energy
lot.
to out all of you. So
Mhm.
be safe, everybody. But welcome to the show. It is good to have you. How does it feel to be live?
I feel alive.
I'm just glad it's at a decent time for us. That's what I'm
That's
grateful
true.
for. Yeah.
That's true. Yeah, because West Coasters, a lot of the time, sometime in the church, we can be a little East Coast centric, and we don't always schedule things so well. And so we are very intentional that we allow our West Coast siblings to be awake and alive at a decent hour to do the work to do this. So, yes, we are starting out on the West Coast this year, and we are so happy to have y'all to talk about some of the things that y'all are very equipped at, and that is the creative. And so, yeah, we're going to get started just by
Great.
one question, and we'll kind of chime in. So, why is it important for us as people of faith and churches to be creative in what we do?
I don't know. I feel like maybe this is just the Presbyterians that I hang out with, that when they hear the word creative, I think they think of like Hobby Lobby or Michael's just threw up in the sanctuary or something, like just vomitous craftiness and glitter, which I'm all for, actually. But I really think creative is just opening yourself up to what you may not notice around the world. And I think especially in faith, just like you're training for a marathon, or you're training, or you're just exercising to get more limber or flexible, I think being creative helps our faith become more limber and flexible and able to adjust and move to things out of our control that happen, and allow us to also see things that God is guiding us to and pointing us to, versus thinking that everything is completely decent and in order, and goes a certain way. So I don't know. I think creative is very necessary for faith communities.
Nice.
Yeah, I think where to even begin? I think when I, you sent us those questions to take a look at, the first thing that pops into my head is this idea that only certain people are creative. And I think there's lots of different things we do that continue to reinforce that. I remember in some of my past work, like there's literally the creative department, and then there were all of the other departments. And I think what that does is it really kind of stifles the fact that we all are all creative in different ways. Some of us lean into the visual arts. Some people are creative musically. Some people are creative because they can look at a problem and solve a problem in different ways. I think one of the best examples of creativity in my mind is like live theater. So you have people who do focus on music. You have people who focus on writing. You have people who focus on the technical side of things. People who are like doing math to build sets and make the lighting and the engineering, special effects, all that stuff work. It's a cool space where all the different like creative disciplines come into play. Even the creativity of how are we going to pay for this thing? Somebody has to figure out how to raise the money and make all of that happen. So I think number one, just creativity is so much more than art and the quote unquote creative disciplines. To me, it's about energy to make something new. And just along the lines of what Theresa was saying is, I think we're invited to look at the world at, God is moving in all sorts of different ways, and not staying in one place, not staying with one thing, not staying with one way of doing things. And it is our invitation is to continue to follow that and get creative in how we tell God's story, how we respond to God's call to us. One of the things I remember in like my worship class in seminary was just the very simple fact that anything we do, no matter how good it is, if we do it over and over and over again, it gets boring. If you went to the same amazing concert over and over and over again, you'd get sick of it and it wouldn't do the same thing that it did for you the first time. So creativity is really one of the things about creativity is just new ways of following, wherever God is leading us, but also new ways of unleashing kind of the energy that we have to create new things, to reach new people and to reach our communities in different and new ways.
Well, I think too, it gives us stamina and endurance too. I think what made the pandemic so hard, but also maybe exciting, is we had to be creative. I think kind of what Sam said, we had to be creative in our problem solving. Everyone had to figure things out in a completely new way. What's interesting is then how are you coming out of this, right? And I think if the expectation is waiting to go back to what was before, you might have to wait a very, very long time versus just fully embracing that creative energy that we had to embrace during the pandemic, and just seeing who you are now and who we are now. And I think by completely building that creative stamina, we're able to then really open ourselves to how faith communities are changing, the needs in our neighborhood is changing, and being way more flexible to be able to meet those needs at a more, I don't know, not a rapid pace, but a pace that meets a need versus, having to form a committee first to figure out how to meet those needs.
Mm-hmm.
I love committees, by the way, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, we know all about committee. Just one of those things.
I just want to say I am pro committee, just not too many.
Well, and I also just like,
There's no shame here, Theresa.
One of the things that also pops into my mind just as we're talking about this too is just, I was, recently ordained, so I got to hear the ordination liturgy, and I will always land on the word imagination and energy and imagination. And like in our kind of our ordination vows, what we say we are about and what we say we do, our elders say this, our leaders say this. When you put energy and imagination together, like that is a creative moment. Those two things coming together, like looking at what is, imagining what could be, and then putting energy towards that. That is the creative cycle and the creative loop. And if in our liturgies, or in our vows, I should say, we're saying we are going to do that, then we should do that. That's part of our tradition. I mean, it's part of just the essence of what it means to reform as well. Reform is a creative act of taking what is and making it something new and molding it into something new and pushing it into new places. So it is embedded in our tradition and beyond our tradition, but then also I think sometimes the order and the structure, it's always a balance between those things. And I think we ought to make sure those things are working really well together.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Sam, I think you live in piece of that word reform, as Presbyterians.
Right.
As a way to try to push change, but the piece that they're always missing that I hear constantly, and what I'm hearing you share, is in Christ or through Christ or the way of Christ. And that piece is always left off. And I just want to hear more concretely, what are some things that you all have been doing to be creative? Like what tangible ways does that look in your community that can be mimicked in other places, but in love, but through Christ? And what have you shed and let go? But what are some of those traditional pieces that we must keep, or that you kept in order to move forward to be faithful partners?
I think people would be surprised that if they come to St. John's for worship, I mean, it is a Presbyterian service. It's a Reformed service. We have an order of worship, but how people feel, one of the things that we say in our welcome is we are inviting you into the space to experience God's presence as you need to. Like, there are no expectations to worship in a particular way. What that means, though, then, if everyone is able to, within reason, to worship as themselves, everyone worships differently, right? And so part of being creative, though, is acknowledging that we all receive and communicate information in different ways. Some are visual, and some are, some love word and liturgy. Some need to touch it and feel it. And it's how in our worship service do we honor all of that, so that it's not that everyone from start to finish feels 100% engaged, but it's that there are going to be moments here where you are going to find something that speaks to how God created you and made you. And if we really want to worship in a diverse community like that, there's no better way than to do that in worship. And it is like, it's a laboratory. Like, within that hour, we are practicing that. We are practicing how to share our stories and react in that, keep each other accountable. Also, figure out how does that impact us, and hopefully do that in a place that is safe and open and real. And I think the hope then is then when we go back out of those doors, we're able to do that out in the world. And so, yeah, sometimes when you have kids, when you have dogs, when you have people of all ages and different life experiences and mobility, things happen. And so even Sam and I, as prepared as we are, we have to tap into our improv skills and know that, you know, whatever happens, it's all going to be okay, and it'll all work itself out. And some Sundays are crazier than other, but there is always an opportunity to practice grace and compassion and challenging what is holy in worship.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, some of the things you said, Theresa, really resonated with me. One is the word laboratory and the word improv that goes with it. I think, and the word practice. So I think all of those really push against rigidity. Every single one of those words push against rigidity. And even the act of being creative, like, I think so many people, myself included, any creative act, like the first thing is that, you know, editor mind of I have to do it right or I'm going to do it wrong. And so it's, you want it to be perfect or not, or you're not going to do it at all. And the fact is, like, creativity or doing anything is really trial and error. It's, you know, I'm going to try this thing, see how it works. And to have a space on, you know, Sunday mornings, to have a physical space where people are there, where we are just trying different things, whether it is a new interactive activity, a new piece of visual art, a new song, like whatever it might be, like we're trying it, we're throwing it out there, we're creating something new for people to say yes to, or maybe this isn't the time for it, or maybe it's yes for some people and not so much for others. A silly, funny example of that. So I just put up a little epiphany star for this past Sunday. It's on my Instagram, or it's on St. John's Instagram as well.
Yeah, y'all go check it out. We'll put the Instagram in the chat.
So it looks really cool. I think it looks really cool.
No, it does. I totally agree. But I know where you're going with this.
But long story short, I didn't have a lot of time to put something new up for our next series because I've been dealing with my dog's been sick the past week, and so my time and schedule has been just a little off. But all that to say, we needed to put something up. So I stood in the sanctuary. I had a bunch of string or rope, and I'm like, we're going to do something. So I made this giant pointy star. I stepped back. It looked real pointy, and at the end of it looked kind of frightening. And so people.
Okay, it doesn't help that you put like a manger in front of it.
It was a manger underneath it. It looked like a little
having to sacrifice something to the.
So it looks a little scary. So all that to say, you have this big, you know, striking, pointy piece of visual art in front of you. And some people reacted like, oh, it's a star. That's really cool. Some people are like, that thing is scary. I do not want to get hit by that. I say that in jest. I mean, it's still up. We're not taking it down. But it's just, we tried something. We threw something out there. It was a big striking statement. It made a statement, and we got to talk about it. We got to laugh about it a little bit too. But all that to say, like, did it necessarily, you know, hit everyone the same way? No. Did it evoke something in everyone? Sure did. And I think that's just an example of, you know, trying something. It as much as the worship space is a place to say, you know, I'm going to practice, I'm going to have a laboratory here. I think just the act of creativity too is like, go with something. And if it doesn't turn out the way that you thought it would, or people's reactions aren't exactly what you thought they were, then you learn from that and you try it again. But that energy is still like to create something new, to respond to people's responses themselves, but to keep that energy moving. And
I think what was great about even Sam, how you approached that last Sunday is, you know, I mean, I think our effort is to put our best foot forward. Of course, you know, we want to put good worship together, good liturgy, good music. But again, things happen. Things happen in our own personal lives that we can't control. And although we want to keep good boundaries and, and not be like, oh, woe is me. Sorry, guys, you're going to get a crappy sermon today because of this. But I think sometimes when we're too creative, it also creates a distance, because then people feel like, well, that's just too good. That's just too beautiful. That's just too perfect. And we can't do it. And I think one of the things that was great that Sam invited us into about that star and a little bit of the backstory is, y'all, it is what it is, right? And so for some of you, it's this gorgeous geometric star. For some of you, it's a little scary. Here's a little bit of the backstory, but it humanizes it a little bit. My story is, I remember coming back from sabbatical, and I had this huge dream to create this huge macrame banner. I've never done macrame before, but I thought I could do it using 100 feet of rope. And it just, after swearing a lot and getting completely frustrated, I ended up just hanging string, like just hanging rope from the ceiling. And I was preaching on Jacob, and I spelled Jacob with a string. And it's funny because some people were impressed by that, but literally I'm just like, this is what it's come down to. And next week there will be the macrame banner, but today it's just string that spells out Jacob right now.
But people were dazzled by that.
They were, yeah. Well, I did notice just in time that I did spell Jacob wrong, but I did fix that. But I think too, just this balance, this healthy balance of humor, playfulness, that we can sometimes be a little even too perfect. We try to perfect creativity in a way. But we can't forget what's the whole purpose of it? What's the whole point of it? And sometimes I think it's just opportunities for even Sam and I just to laugh at ourselves and go, y'all, this is what it is. It's okay. The world's not going to fall apart. Tomorrow, it'll hopefully be closer to what I was envisioning in my head, or in what, you all are envisioning. But I think it also is opportunities to, let other people see our humanness and accept their humanness and go, okay, it's okay. We can laugh about this.
Yeah, and that's the beauty of, and that's one of the reasons why we started this show in some ways, is that this show is far from perfect. And it also just shows the humanity in people, the freedom to laugh, the freedom to to be ourselves and to be authentic, and to show that this doesn't have to be like a perfect thing. The internet is unpredictable. You never know when connections are going to be crappy, or you never know when something's going to happen behind me and I don't even know. Like, my dog often makes an appearance. And so, but it's also in those moments where you see the spirit, and often creativity invites that. It invites those moments of humanity. I think one of the best things I ever saw in a church once is they were being very creative on a Good Friday. And so they had the cross, and there was some dance, but there was also some interactions and rituals, and some of that had to deal with candles and putting candles on the cross and things like that. It was kind of interesting. But one of the best things I ever saw was somebody almost knocked over the cross, and it was it was a lot of candles, and it could have just put everything up into flames. And people started snickering, and the person who did it, was a person that never took himself seriously, and he kind of laughed it off and made a joke. And it was in the middle of a Good Friday service, which is meant to be very death, you know what I mean? But even within those moments of death and the moments where we experience those things, there's also laughter and weird things that happen, and awkwardness that I think often the creative can invite in many ways.
Well, and it's funny how the Holy Spirit, I have a funny Good Friday story. My predecessor, previous pastor here, we had a Good Friday service, and he tried to be creative. That didn't quite work, I think, in the way he imagined it, but he had tied a bunch of stuffed animals together to kind of look like a body, and it was on the chancel. And the service, it's getting darker and darker because it's a Good Friday service. And it got so dark that the church that was renting space from us, they had a Good Friday service right after ours. He couldn't see that anybody was in the sanctuary. And so we're all sitting there in silence and meditating on this weird stuffed animal body. And he comes in the middle of the service and goes, "John, it's Barry." But what we heard was, "John, he's buried." And everyone thought it was like a liturgical like script and a scene. And we just went with it. We're like, yes, he is buried. But it was really Barry saying, "I'm here." But yeah, we were just, it's those kind of things. We're like, well, the Holy Spirit somehow worked itself out that and theologized that whole entire weirdness that just happened.
That's hilarious. Oh my gosh.
You were faithful Presbyterians to have that response ready.
Right? It's like, yes.
It's Barry.
Yeah, it is interesting. And I know that y'all have also done some other things, and Dolly Parton is one of those things. And I would love for y'all to talk about that service, but also just for everyone who is listening, and that we're clear, is like, the creative does at the center of it all is God and love, and then kind of the creative also kind of invites a lot of different things, and it's not just like we're just doing this for funsies, like some of it is fun, but a lot of it is kind of rooted in the spirit. But y'all also had a service that had Dolly Parton involved, and if you know me, I'm a big fan, and yeah, I sing her songs all the time, and she's actually right here. She's blurred, but there's a cover of her and Playboy, actually.
Oh, yeah, she's right there on our hymn board.
Oh yeah, there she is. And so I would love for y'all to talk. Y'all have done a lot of different cool things like that, but talk a little bit about that, and maybe why that is, that was kind of something that came up for folk out there.
Yeah, I want to just, the first part of what you said is also what Theresa said, talking about just what is the purpose. And yes, the purpose can be playful, creativity or changing things from kind of the everyday can be for fun. It can be playful, but I think it really is about, creativity for creativity's sake can just be, there ends up often not being that connection point. It's just like, hey, look what I can do. And like, that's nice. But if there's not meaning behind it, if it's not guiding people towards something, and if it doesn't have a clear purpose with it, I think we can often get lost in that. So I think in terms of, creative exercises, I think it is important to step back and say, what is this for? Why am I doing this? What is, this visual piece trying to say? Does that mean that people will necessarily get what you're trying to say? No, not necessarily. But if it's just, I'm going to do this pretty thing to do this pretty thing, like I think it's we can kind of get lost in that sometimes. But I think the Dolly service is a good example of that. The genesis of that was really, how do we create a pride service for June of last year? How do we create a pride service that connects the St. John's community with the queer community, but also invites everyone who's in that space together to see how we're taking some really traditional ways of doing a church service and stretching them and widening them, both in terms of who's involved in that space, the songs and messages that we're including in that space, but also showing the church is a physical space. Like, how can we really stretch ourselves as we enter into this space and then carry that out into our lives, into our city and our neighborhoods beyond that. So our Dolly service was a really traditional service. It followed a very traditional, order of worship, singing, call to worship. We had, prayers throughout for different parts of the queer community, and invitations for us to, again, stretch ourselves in acceptance, belonging, and creating spaces of welcome. We had, we read scripture. We read, different portions of the story of Joseph's dreams, and Joseph's relationship with his family. From Genesis, we had videos of interviews with queer people and their experiences in various church communities and where they sit now in their faith life. We had a drag performance, because you can't do that without a drag performance. So we did that. But all that to say, like, if you just looked at it on paper, like, it was a normal church service. Like, there wasn't anything, new and crazy and different. We had a very formal communion liturgy. Like, it was a very traditional service. But all that to say, all of the pieces that were in that space, the songs that we sang were all Dolly Parton songs. The message, the sermon connected our scripture story to a little bit of Dolly's story, to the story of queer people in our world right now. And the purpose of that, it wasn't, you could put Dolly on top of everything and it becomes a gimmick. And this, we don't want that. We want this to point people to someplace. We want this to really kind of sit with people. And Dolly happens to be, she's a person and an artist where people already have a connection point. And so it's inviting people to say, okay, we trust that God moves wherever God wants to in all sorts of different ways. Here is a person and their art that we all have found, or most people, beloved connections with in our lives. What happens when we really start to tease that apart and kind of bring that together with scripture, which with kind of the most important parts of our tradition, and then invite people to see new connection points in their own lives, and then hopefully be able to carry that out into the world. So yeah, that's kind of, for me, like when I look at that service, it was like tradition, and then all of these other ways of building connections with people, inviting them to see God in new places and new people and in new ways.
And I think what was great about the Dolly Church is I think creativity can't just stay in the sanctuary. It can't just stay in worship. It has to be pervasive, like how the system functions within the church, how your committees meet, how you have conversations. So I think one of the questions that Sam and I had, because we really hadn't had a prayer service at St. John's before, was how was the community going to react to this? What was going to be the response? And that's, I think, where creativity also comes in, because the creative process is often you don't know what the end result's going to be until you're doing it. Or you don't even sometimes know as the process is going along what you're quite doing. I mean, you're really letting go at every step of the way, versus, let's form a committee. Let's figure out all the ifs, ands, buts, all the things that could happen so that we can predict what the end result is. And if we do it this way, we guarantee that end result. And that's just not how we did it. It was, we're going to try this. And we have built enough trust equity over time with our other creative outlets that our community knows we will always bring it back to them to be like, so what have we learned? How has this experience been? How will we move forward from this? How is this meaningful for you? How is this not meaningful for you? And so in some ways, how you engage in that, how you make decisions also has to be equally creative. So.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I think I'm glad you brought that up. Like that's kind of the pastoral side of creativity. And in this particular, with this particular service, we did communicate through our newsletter and announcing it in our services ahead of time. Like, here are to set your expectations. Like, here's what this Sunday is going to look like. here's what we're focusing on. We're inviting new stories, new music into this place. So if anybody had any questions about that or had any misgivings about that, they had the time and they had the open space to get those addressed. And I do know stories. There are folks who have had different creative services where the same types of things. And actually the same community, the queer community, were brought into the space in a really unexpected way, and things were not communicated ahead of time. And that doesn't mean you have to, 4 weeks out, send the whole liturgy and the thing, but like give people a sample or a taste of what they might expect. But all that to say, what happened in that space was really jarring for people. They didn't know what they were getting into. And again, kind of going back to the purpose, like thinking about the purpose and thinking about kind of how that will sit with people, there is that what Teresa's talking about, the time before where people are anticipating that and making sure you're not just throwing people into this new fire of creativity, because that is the beauty of that's the point of tradition, is to know I'm going to walk into a space that I come to every Sunday, and at least parts of it are going to feel like they always do, and they're going to feel held. I'm going to feel held in that space. Or if the intention is to really, shake that up, then tell people this isn't going to feel like it normally does, or something like that. We've also done, we were mentioning Good Friday, like we've done different, Good Friday services, different Ash Wednesday services. And I think those are actually some really good points throughout the year to kind of break some of the rules, break a lot of the rules, because those aren't often, they aren't the Sunday gathering. They're usually an evening service. There are different types of, or zero expectations on what those services might be. So I think those are actually really good times to try things, and have people have a willingness to kind of be open to those moments.
Sam and Theresa, I love what you're saying around, like, if you want to be creative, there's a sort of change that comes along with that dynamic naturally, but also the amount of, and I hate how this word gets thrown around sometimes, so I'm gonna start there, but safe space that people need to trust what you're doing. And it seems like that you all have created that trust. And it goes on to not only trust in, what we're doing within the community, but trust in, like, as humanity, and recognizing like this is a sacred creative justice issue, to create that trust for people to maybe feel a little uneasy or some anxiety, but still trusting in the process, trusting in the creative space, and living into the moment without fully knowing what is going on. If someone is trying to, again, create some of these changes creatively within their communities, what are some of that level of trust that you all have built over time to move this in the direction of creativity, if that makes sense?
Yeah, I think one of the phrases I actually don't care for is when people say, trust the process. Because I don't know, well, who made this process? Because that's what I'm not trusted. I don't know if it's not, I think what people know, and I think it's from just building relationships, is Sam and I are almost equally vulnerable in the creative process as other people are. I don't think we try our best to not ask other people to be vulnerable in ways that we are not allowing our own selves to be vulnerable as well. And so I think a part of it is, I think it goes back to like what we were saying with the Dolly Church, is giving people time to build a covenant around the fact that they can always be honest with us. We will always go back to you to receive feedback. There is this is not a, shut up and experience it. And if you don't like it, there's the door. We're learning as well. We're all co-learners in this whole experience. And even at times when we disagree, though, we will always have an honest conversation about that. And so I think a part of it is it's relationship based versus process based. There's no perfect process. And even if this process worked out, there's no guarantee it's going to work out tomorrow. So I think what it is just we are always just trying to enter in to the same space that we're asking of people as well. And I think through that, then we build trust equity. Then there's a little less of that we have to do, because people are like, we've been down this road with Theresa and Sam before. Okay, we trust it. Or, all right, we trusted you, but that didn't go the way we are. But because we have this relationship, I'm going to now speak my truth to that. So I don't know. It's not. There's not a perfect place, but I don't believe in trust the process.
I like that phrase. No, it's thrown around a lot.
I trust you, Sam. I trust you in your process.
No, I mean that you're right. That phrase can totally be turned around into just like, deal with whatever the end result is and blah blah. Like no. I just want to echo everything Theresa said. Just relationships. I just think of an example of, and again, creativity can mean all sorts of different things. But for example, we have someone in our congregation who is an artist and a teacher of art to I think it's kindergartners, maybe first graders, younger kids. And we often have him come, and he's he's an elder here too, but come into our service and help lead our youth and our adults in artistic little projects. This past Christmas, we did a watercolor project and made a bunch of different watercolor Christmas cards that went down to one of the nursing homes down the street, just a couple blocks, and we delivered those to folks. But all that to say, people know this, everyone knows this elder, and everyone knows this elder has a wonderful artistic gift. And so because they know him and they know he's sharing his gift, there's trust there. There's I'm going to go hang out with, this elder and make cards with him. And it's going to be fun. There's trust, and then there's an invitation with that trust. And that means something new can happen there. Because someone who's I can't do any watercolor, it's the scariest thing, is going to go over and hang out at this table with a bunch of kids and realize, they can do something fun. It might not look exactly like they thought it would, but we're grateful for it, and we're going to make something cool with that. And I think that idea, that trust in creativity can go all over the place. And I think, just in terms of, tangible, practical things that folks can do, I think that's one of them, is harness the relationships and the creativity that already exist in your community. And invite those folks to extend the invitation to the larger community to start, bringing that into the space. Even with our singers, music is something that is sometimes hard to touch in church spaces. But we have, some wonderful soloists that we've just reached out to and said, what are your favorite songs? We don't want them to be church songs. They can be any type of song. But tell us a song that you would stand in front of a mic and sing from your heart because you want to, not because you have to, something that has deep meaning for you. And we had one of our singers, he came after service with his guitar one time and was like, I have two pieces for you that I really love and I want to play them for you. And the first one, he's like, this one's weird. I don't know about this one. And it was the most touching, beautiful lullaby of a song from some artist, some indie artist I never had ever heard of. But he brought it to us. And then 2 weeks later, it was just this beautiful song about a parent saying, if I, can't find the words to say I love you, I'm going to say them with the wind, and if it stops, if there's no wind, I'll say it with the rain, and if there's no rain, I'll say it with the sunshine. Like all these beautiful, beautiful ways of saying I love you. And we used it as a response song for a sermon, and it was just this beautiful connection point that our one of our singers brought to us. And I think we obviously we trust him and his musical gifts and his heart for our community, and just to see how all of that came together was really, really beautiful. The other thing I want to add to this that just popped into my head was, I think in terms of our worship spaces, there's lots of different people to account for, and I think the issue of trust is a really big one right now, because I think there's the trust within the community that this is something about here needs to feel familiar, and I need to feel like grounded in this space. But there's also the fact, and I kind of come from, more of the queer community as a gay man myself, like there's a lot of distrust of those spaces. So with a space like, Dolly Church or a Pride service or something like that, the relationships and the people are probably the most important thing. I would say they're always the most important thing, but especially important in that space, because those are the people that are holding hands with people who are entering into a space that has hurt them, has harmed them. And then at the same time, that hand holding is helping the congregation stretch and say like, hey, this space that felt one certain way and only certain people were invited or involved in it, now we can hold hands in a wider way. And I think that's what relationships are doing in that space. And it's really all about trust and fostering that trust in different ways and using the creative disciplines to help with that.
I think too, what you're saying, Sam, is we want to invite all, but we don't require everyone to participate. And so there is too, I think, a part of that whole trusting the process is there's always an out, so we don't require 100% participation, but we do offer an opportunity to do something different, opportunity to do something that might stretch you. So I think that also helps with the trust too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, and also with that, like, again, really talking about the worship service and that experience of gathering and being together, I think, yes, people are engaged in that experience in all sorts of different ways. And sometimes like just seeing someone in the space or seeing something in the space is transformative and will stretch people and open people up. A quick example of that, like I was in, where was it? We were in Mississippi with the San Fransisco Gay Men's Chorus on tour. And our first church stop with part of the chorus was singing at a Presbyterian church. It was Fondren Presbyterian in Jackson, Mississippi. And we brought a group of about 50 singers to the service. The pastor there, he invited, before the service, he invited everybody to come down for communion if they wanted to. And we sang our communion piece, and I was expecting me and one other Presbyterian from the chorus to go down there. And we had a good, 75% of our singers come down to the communion table. And the way that they serve communion is the pastor will bless the elements, and then they're passed around and served to one another around the table. So we kind of came down row by row and encircled the table. And it was just the most moving communion service I've ever been a part of, because you have all of these men who were, many of them hurt by different churches over the years, and they were serving one another. And it was just this beautiful healing moment. But all that to say, there was a woman in the congregation who was at that service, saw all of that. She wasn't up at the table with these men. She just participated in the service, and she had voted against the pastor who was a gay man when he was installed. And she encountered him after and said, I saw all of this. I saw this communion moment, and I get it. I get why you're my pastor. I'm proud you're my pastor. And it's even just, and all that happened because singers were invited into a space. That in and of itself was a creative act. It was a just act. And someone just witnessing that, not even, touching a person, like they were they were observing, and they got this really important moment. And there's a really beautiful healing moment in that church because some singers showed up, and that's beautiful.
That is beautiful. And it kind of just speaks to how this conversation, this is a justice work, being like speaking into the creative and kind of going with that. And I wonder how y'all might, answer that question. Like, how is this a work of justice? The sacred creative, how are we, how is that in and of itself justice work? Because in the work that I do and how I experience music and how I experience art, the creative breaks barriers and boundaries where simple words or academia or a sermon may not do so. And someone said, and I can never remember who said this, but like the artists will be the ones that speak to what's happening in the world in ways that people will understand it, or ways that will identify and people can really identify with. And so I wonder how you might say, like, this is the work of justice and doing this work that y'all do. How do you see it as a work of justice?
Well, I think that all the muscles that we use to be creative definitely roll over and apply to when we speak of justice issues. And I think oftentimes just speaking about justice issues gets labeled as being political in the church. Well, it is, but we're not talking about who to vote for. We're talking about policies or actions that happen in our daily lives that affect how we live, that affect our neighbors. And as faith people, how are we called to then support one another, encourage one another, and also respond to that and engage in the world? And if that doesn't take creativity, I don't know what does. That takes relationships, trust, equity. That takes really being creative in our problem solving and how we're engaging, but also how we're having that conversation within the church building, and within worship. And so I remember when we were discerning to become a sanctuary church, that was a really, really hot topic. And there were a lot of myths that were flying around immigration issues and how safe or unsafe undocumented immigrants are. And the PR campaign was so strong about criminalizing undocumented immigrants as being completely unsafe. And it just so happened when we were discerning becoming a sanctuary church, we actually had an incident that happened in San Francisco that was clear evidence. See, undocumented immigrants are unsafe. And we were able to use kind of a creative process in worship where I had, along the walls, I had put every single immigration law from the time that, Native Americans and stepping on, the Pilgrims stepping foot on Plymouth Rock all the way to now, and invited people to wander around the sanctuary to imagine and see, when were your ancestors coming? When did they migrate here? And what was an immigration law that helped or prevented your family from coming here? And all it comes down to is humanizing. It's really coming down to relationships and humanizing it. These are people. These are people who are housing vulnerable. These are people who are on the streets. These are people who have food insecurity issues. These are people who are trying to come to a safe place and immigrate here. It's about people. And if we can remember that, the best tool, I think, is creativity, because it really opens us up beyond our own circumstances, beyond our own prejudices, beyond our own perspectives, to hear someone else's story.
Mm-hmm. I think the center, at least for me, but I do think that one of the phrases that starts the creative process is "what if," and kind of filling in that blank. It's really, looking at what's in front of you, whether it is an empty sanctuary and a chancel you have to fill with something beautiful or sharp and pointy, depending on the season. But it really starts with what if, what if I had a bunch of string and I did this thing? What if I, had a million stars and I hung them from the ceiling? Like what if that happened? And I think that's one of the same phrases we start when we talk about justice and really the kingdom of God, is looking at the world in front of us and saying, what if it was something different? What if, and what is that different thing? What do we have in front of us to get to that dream? What do we have in front of us to get from point A to point B? What if we lived in a city that honored its, immigrant, migrant, refugee, asylum-seeking siblings? What if we showed our congregation every single law and connected them to that story themselves? And I think that for me, like, that question of imagination is really important, starting with the what if. If a community can't do that, and can't dream and imagine, I think that's a place to start. It is really starting with what if, and starting, both in the building, in the neighborhood, in the city, and beyond. But I think the creative process and the process of justice, or working to the kingdom of God, this kingdom of peace, it starts with this what if. And if those juices get flowing, creativity is really taking that dream and putting, meat on the bones to it in all the ways that are possible, through whatever disciplines, creative disciplines, technical disciplines, are at your disposal. But I think it really starts with that question of what if.
Thank you, Sam. As we're coming to a close, Theresa, do you have any final words or comments to leave the audience with?
I think just that, believe it or not, you are already creative. I think it's just, if we are fashioned by a creative God, then clearly you are a creative child of God. It looks different in every person, and it manifests itself different in every person. We could not be living our day-to-day lives without tapping into our sense of creativity. Why, though, we don't expect that same amount of creativity to happen within the walls of the church, I don't know. Tradition is beautiful, but tradition is, again, it goes to the same question Sam talked about: creativity for the sake of creativity, tradition for the sake of tradition. So what if it could be different, and why are we doing it all? That's a great place to start.
Awesome. Well, we love y'all, and we are so thankful that y'all have joined us today for the first episode of season 3 of Just Talk Live. This was wonderful, and I hope everyone who listens, if you have any questions, you can send us an email. I sent y'all the Instagram to St. John's to see the cross above the star.
Yes.
And all the things. So check all that out. And before we close, I did want to give a little preview of what is coming up. So on January the 24th, all these episodes are at 1 p.m. Eastern Time. We will have Alana Suskin and Hamza Khan here to talk about how we end anti-Semitism and Islamophobia. They're a great duo that does that work in their communities, kind of in the DMV area and the DC area. So we will welcome them on January 24th. So write that down. And on February 7th, we will be talking about reproductive justice with Margaret Kamasuka and Tony Bond, who is one of the mothers of reproductive justice. So we are very excited to have them on the show for this season. So everyone write on your calendar. It happens at 1 p.m. Eastern time, live on everything. So yes. Yeah. Did you say something, Destiny?
I was just telling them to lock us in. And also thank you to Sam and Theresa for having us think creative and asking those questions and taking the step not only to try something new, but to know that we are enough. And by our being, we are creative. So thank you for that reminder.
Yeah. Thank y'all so much. And to all of our watchers, we will see you next time. Bye, everybody.